Sherry, over to you.
Warm greetings from Arlington, Virginia. My name is Sherry Mueller, and it's my privilege to serve as the president of the Public Diplomacy Council. It is also my privilege to welcome each of you to this webinar, this first Monday Forum. There are three co-sponsors to First Monday Forums, the Public Diplomacy Association of America, the USC Annenberg Center on Communication, Policy, and Leadership, and of course, the Public Diplomacy Council. I'd like to thank our tech hosts today, PDC Rising Professional member, Alistair Somerville. He reminds me to tell you that please use the chat box for any kind of technical difficulty, and please put your questions in the Q&A box. And please also give your name and an affiliation when you ask your question. It is really personally as well as professionally rewarding to introduce this program today. Global Ties U.S. at 60, Building a Domestic Constituency for Public Diplomacy. I can't think of a more important topic that we can be addressing. Almost 16 years of my career was spent at the helm of Global Ties U.S. when it was known as the National Council for International Visitors. I certainly learned then the vital importance of advocacy and was blessed with a board chair who was a personal friend of Senator Kit Bond of Missouri. And one of our first Hill events was hosted by Bruce Buckland and Senator Kit Bond. In 2011, it was my honor to usher this impressive network through a series of 50th anniversary events. And in a few moments, you will hear from Dr. Katherine Brown, the current president of Global Ties U.S., who will offer her comments and moderate our webinar today. Katherine is doing an exceptional job of guiding Global Ties U.S. through its 60th anniversary year, including hosting a memorable national conference that featured a closing plenary with Secretary Blinken. Because of Katherine's unique mix of experiences that she brings to her role as an author, as a professor at Georgetown, she worked extensive experience on the Hill, her master's from her doctorate from Columbia. She's had experience working at Facebook, and perhaps for our audience today, a particular highlight of her career is her service as director of the staff of the U.S. Commission on Public Diplomacy. She understands the necessity for building a domestic constituency for public diplomacy, and more important, she knows how to do it. She's joined by wonderful advocates as well. Annette Alvarez, I've had the privilege of working with Annette. She's been at the head of Global Ties Miami for 16 years. She received one of the 60th anniversary awards at the last national meeting. It was my privilege to present it to her. Annette, so pleased you're part of this and doing what you do so well in Florida and beyond. I'm also pleased to introduce Felecia Maxfield-Barrett. She brings 20 years of experience with organizations such as the Utah Refugee Coalition and others to her pivotal role as the executive director of the Utah Council for Citizen Diplomacy. Always been a very strong member of the Global Ties Network, and delighted to have Felecia with us. So we're in for a wonderful program. An inspiring one, and one that I hope promotes action. Before I turn it over to Katherine, we will have the opportunity to look at a 2-minute video about Global Ties. And then Katherine, the floor is yours. Alistair, the video, please.
This was President Kennedy's vision for Global Ties U.S. when it was founded in 1961, and it remains so today. At Global Ties U.S., we believe that international exchanges create trust between leaders in government, business, and civil society, and help advance peace and prosperity. In 1961, we were created to serve the International Visitor Leadership Program and strengthen global alliances through our citizens. We foster connections that break down borders, shatter stereotypes, and create a more peaceful, prosperous world. Today, we're a network of more than 120 organizations representing all 50 U.S. states and more than 20 countries. We're community organizers and citizen ambassadors. We create opportunities for our cities and build trust for our nation. We do this by welcoming more than 5,000 exchange participants to the United States each year, reinvesting into the U.S. economy 10 to 1 the amount of federal funding received, engaging more than 34,000 volunteers and 410,000 hours of community service. Through exchanges, we are enhancing our national security, helping U.S. citizens and communities compete in a global marketplace, connecting U.S. and international counterparts to solve challenges. Our call to service 6 decades ago has never been more relevant. We are committed to modernizing exchange programs, diversifying our field, powering individuals, communities, and nations to build trust through international exchange. Diplomacy begins here.
Hey, well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having us here today and joining your first Monday Forum. I'm Katherine Brown, President and CEO of Global Ties U.S., and I'm very grateful for our partnership with the Public Diplomacy Association of America, Public Diplomacy Council, and of course, USC Annenberg. And before I go any further, I also want to acknowledge Sherry. It's been some time since she led this organization, but I think it's really important to just describe to you all really how she laid the foundation for us to be where we are today here at 60 years. Her commitment to the citizen diplomats on the ground that make up our network and to helping young people entering the field still shapes a lot of what we do. Our Emerging Leaders Program, which started under her leadership, brings interns and young professionals from around the country to Washington for professional development, networking, and mentorship. And it really helps us build a diverse and inclusive pipeline for young professionals to join our field. And private donors make that possible. And she was so committed to this that she established an endowment before she left NCIB, then Global Ties, so that we can continue to offer paid internships. So I think was pretty groundbreaking when Sherry introduced that a couple decades ago. And so we really do want to find ways for talented young people to launch their careers with us. And so Sherry, I just want you to know that your legacy at Global Ties is very strong. I am very grateful for your support and leadership. And that really connects with what we're speaking about today with advocacy. I first got to meet Sherry a decade ago when I was a professional staff member for the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And with a newly created portfolio of supporting U.S. public diplomacy and international broadcasting efforts at the time. And I've been in the job for just a couple of weeks when I was asked to join a meeting with Sherry Mueller. And it was the first time I learned the details about this extraordinary network. And we worked together a decade ago to pass an act acknowledging 50 years of citizen diplomacy. And until then, I'd spoken with scores of exchange alumni from Afghanistan and Pakistan and other South Asian countries, as I spent a lot of my professional life in that region. But I hadn't quite connected the dots yet on what happened once they got to the United States, and learning that this network was the infrastructure for the International Visitor Leadership Program was really energizing for me because it revealed a whole other level of depth to this work. The impact that the network has, not just among true global change makers, for our frontline diplomats abroad, but also the influence this network has within their communities. And they at once make up a constituency for the State Department and also create global gateways for their communities to connect with the world. And we're talking a lot today about foreign policy for all or foreign policy for the middle class or the domestic dimensions of public diplomacy, and to reach larger swaths of Americans to engage in foreign affairs, to advance subnational diplomacy efforts. The infrastructure for that was really largely, it was laid 60 years ago with this network. So I can't tell you what a profound honor it is to be here with you today, 10 years after that first meeting with Sherry, to learn about this network and to celebrate 60 years of citizen diplomacy. And to introduce you to two of my wonderful colleagues, Annette Alvarez at Global Ties Miami and Felecia Maxfield-Barrett at Utah Citizen Diplomacy Council, two extraordinary leaders, not just in their communities in Miami and Salt Lake City, but also nationwide for this network. So I have a very short presentation that I'm going to get out of the way so that you can hear from them. And so next slide, please, Alistair. The first thing I want to just talk about is the commitment to this network is really astounding. We're celebrating 60 years, and 40 of our colleagues at the Office of International Visitors at the State Department are celebrating more than 10 years with this program. More than 75 colleagues throughout our community-based member network are celebrating a decade, and more than 25 of our national program agency colleagues are celebrating a decade or more. And so this community is really extraordinary, and we really believe that community, creating feelings of fellowship and belonging matters a lot right now. And it matters globally because the world's a social system. International relations is literally about relationships, and our alliances and partnerships are critical to solving the transnational challenges that are having a real impact on our daily lives, like the pandemic. But community also matters at home because it's personal. And as we all know, we're facing much divisiveness within our country. And according to Pew Research, about 7 in 10 Americans think people are less confident in each other than they were 20 years ago. But when you ask people who they trust, it's the people they engage with in their communities. And so promoting that sense of belonging inspires collaboration and cooperation for real problem solving. And at the core of every relationship, whether it be between individuals, communities, or nations, is trust. So the Global Ties U.S. board and team created our new mission statement to go into our 60th year. And it's this: powering individuals, communities, and nations to build trust and advance peace and prosperity through international exchange. And we added building trust because, again, trust is the foundation of every relationship, and the ones that we build at home and abroad. And no one can build that better than members of this network. So next slide. Great. So I spoke a little bit about our history and you saw our video, but we were created originally to support the International Visitor Leadership Program, and we have expanded since. The network began as a grassroots effort, a lot of all volunteer groups, but the network has really remarkably professionalized, especially in the last decade or so. And so I have the joy each day of working with more than 100 nonprofit executives who wake up every day thinking about how to create global connectivity for their communities. Next slide, please. And you'll see here that there are more than 120 organizations that are part of our network. That includes nearly 90 organizations in the United States, 84 of which directly work on IVLP, and then dozens more internationally that are largely alumni of IVLP and other exchange programs who were so affected by their time in the United States that they want to stay connected to this domestic network and keep the exchange going. Next slide, please. And this is the reach that is within the United States. It covers all 50 states, even though we don't have members in all 50 states, but we make sure that there's the programming for IVLP and other exchanges covers all 50 states. As you'll see our reach here. And next slide. This is really our network-wide impact. You're going to hear more about the impact, in Miami and Salt Lake City and the state of Utah in a second. But if you, in a pre-COVID year, our network would welcome 5,000 international exchange participants to U.S. in person and virtually to the United States, invest 10 to 1 the federal funding received back into the U.S. economy. And that is a key advocacy point that we emphasize with members of Congress when we do our normal advocacy calls to action. And also, they were reaching out to more than 34,000 community resources and volunteers each year, setting up meetings and home hospitality, ensuring that our members of our network are not just listening to foreign participants, but also listening and engaging their communities. Next slide, please. And at Global Ties U.S., we're at our heart a membership organization, and we think about our members and what we can do to support them every day. And so we do that via capacity and community building, via different trainings, events like our national meeting and other regional events that we do, and communications. And part of this means accelerating our diversity, equity, and inclusion work for our organization and for the network, which is really essential for our ability to meet our mission and do our part to advance social justice and racial equity, and really make sure that our exchange programming and our network really reflects the United States to the world. And we extend that work kind of going all the way over to the right through our program work to pass through more opportunity for members of our network to be part of U.S. public diplomacy and exchanges. So International Visitor Leadership Program is that it's part of our origin. It's at the core of what we do. We've also expanded recently to support the USA Pavilion at Expo 2020 Dubai to make sure that citizen diplomacy is at the heart of that effort through our Youth Ambassador and Culture Performer program. We also are thrilled to be now working with the Alumni Affairs Office at the Educational and Cultural Affairs Bureau to support U.S. exchange alumni in becoming citizen diplomats once they return back to the United States. And through other exchange programs, we work with the INL Bureau through their embassy in Mexico on a law enforcement security exchange and a few other exchanges. But really what we're talking about today is that central pillar, which is advocacy. And this is really the superpower of the network. Our members are constituents. Me, I'm a DC resident. I don't have the same pull on the Hill that our members do. And so they have worked really hard to build relationships with their state delegations, which means that we can call on them for action when it comes to passing the federal budget, making sure there's a strong international affairs and educational and cultural exchange budget, but also for other advocacy items that do affect the larger public diplomacy community, thinking about what was going on with the J-1 visa last year during COVID. We're all thinking about Afghanistan right now. And so we believe that looking forward in this post-pandemic world, that we have one of the greatest opportunities we've had in a long time to rethink global cooperation and how it can work for a modern world. And we believe that this original call to service we had 60 years ago has never been more urgent, because the power of exchanges to meet the moment is enduring. And so next slide, please. I feel very lucky to turn it over now to Annette and Felecia, who had been so innovative with their advocacy work and built critical relationships with their members of Congress that help us move the ball forward on international exchanges, and to make sure that IVLP doesn't just continue, but that it thrives and it adapts to this modern world. And they inspire us every day, and I am just absolutely thrilled that you all will meet them now. And so I'm going to turn it over to Annette first, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine. It's amazing to be here today, and I am just thrilled to have accepted Sherry's invitation with this idea of explaining with my colleague Felecia what it is we do and how we support not just this program in day-to-day work that we do, but in advocacy. It's also a pleasure to be in the company of people who've spent their professional lives in service to our country, with the Foreign Service, with those in academic and professional careers in public diplomacy, and with those who are the next generation to follow these paths. For the past 62 years, Global Ties Miami, formerly the Miami Council for International Visitors, has believed that international exchanges of ideas, culture, and friendship are a tangible way to build bridges of mutual understanding and trust amongst people foreign to one another. We've accomplished our mission over the years by supporting the different iterations what is now the International Visitor Leadership Program. I've often mentioned what I think is the genius of the IVLP, the public-private partnership between the U.S. Department of State, national program agencies, Global Ties U.S., and its domestic network of 84 or so community members, each pledging to carry out the objectives of the program. It is collaborative and approachable and real. In Miami, Salt Lake City, and across the U.S., we have the privilege and responsibility of transferring these ideas from policy to actionable events. We host hundreds of IVLP participants each year, and we have an alumni database of thousands of remarkable people who have been in South Florida and in Miami, mostly in person, and more recently virtually. While proud of our accomplishment, the Global Ties Miami board, led by Dr. Athena Becerra, and I realized that in order for this program and other exchanges to continue, we need to be vocal in our support. Alistair, I can't tell if you're showing it yet, but if you can show the first of two photos, great, thank you. So we do that via advocacy with our elected officials at the local, state, and national levels. What you're seeing right here is a meeting outside our senator's office in the hallway, which unfortunately we have to take some meetings with staff like that, but we don't mind as long as they give us the time. So who does this with us? Well, our board members, staff, and interns, and whenever possible, our international visitors or alumni if they're attending the national meeting. Next slide, Alistair. Thanks. How we do it? Well, several ways. Annually, we request meetings with our members of Congress or their staff while attending the Global Ties U.S. national meeting in DC. And just a part here where this, when I first joined the network, this was kind of nascent, this idea of getting out and doing advocacy. And this was a long time ago. I've been executive director, as Sherry said, for 16 years. And I've just seen, there's always been an importance on doing this work. But when Katherine said that there's this innovation to it, I mean, we do accept the challenge, and then we try and say, you know, how can we get this message? How can we get this message out to those people that we are wanting to do that with? So we attend the national meeting, we get appointments with our members of Congress or their staff. We take advantage of in-district meetings or constituent hours. And we also join advocacy calls with other organizations like the Alliance for International Exchange and the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. And what do we say? Well, we fortunately often start with thank you, because in South Florida, there is a strong support for international engagement through trade, foreign investment, and exchanges. Alistair, if you want to show the other flyer, you don't have to try and read what's on these flyers, but what we're trying to say is when we meet with our elected officials and their staff, we're conveying to them the importance of these exchanges. We like to do the big picture. We like to talk to them about the economic impact in our community. You saw Katherine had better slides on that, but the economic impact in our community, and then how that reverberates through our state. We also like to mention, you know, these big issues that IVLP and exchanges help support our national security, that help support our standing on the global stage. And then moving into page 2 of that slide, Alistair, we highlight the program, the IVLP. We let them know that in 2017 that 7 alumni made Time's 100 most influential lists. So we give them a picture of who these individuals are that we're hosting in our community. And then we also like to mention to them that who are these hosts in our community? Well, they are the members of Congress constituents, the very people who agree to volunteer their time to meet with our IVLP participants and share best practices. And we mention other constituents, those who support our efforts via membership and donations. We also like to personalize for our members of Congress. If you can scroll a little bit further down, I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is one instance where we recently had a virtual project, and it was for judges and others from Brazil who work in reuniting families, international parental child abduction under the Hague Treaty and so forth. And because we're in our communities and because we're local, we can tap individuals and maybe put a bit of a creative spin on something related to a personal topic or a professional topic. And this was one of those. We had a mother who was only one of two women who've had their children returned from Lebanon recently, or even ever. But they are, she was in this meeting and she was actually taking the place of someone else. But Senator Rubio had been advocating for her and helped. She credits him with a lot of support. So we decided to personalize this message and insert a picture of how this meeting took place and what happened and what some of the remarks were following the meeting from the delegation of judges from Brazil. So it was really impactful. And once the staff member saw this, he starts scribbling wildly and says, don't worry, the senator will see this. So this is what we try and do. Our goal with every advocacy effort is to show and tell the importance of exchanges, the constituents' support for them, and the expectation that our congressional members understand the value and dividends of the investment and will continue to support the funding because we know it's important. And we think that they appreciate hearing from us. Thank you. Felecia, I believe it's your turn.
All right. Thank you, Annette. Alistair, can you bring up my slides, please? And I just want to reiterate a lot of what was said in terms of thank you to the three sponsors of this event. Sherry had mentioned at the very beginning that this couldn't be a more timely conversation that we're having. I absolutely agree with it. I feel like with the global events that we've seen just even in the last couple of years, that now is the time to get people involved and have these strong conversations about how we connect as communities with communities around the world. And I do want to give just a heartfelt congratulations to Global Ties U.S. on 60 years of success in connecting the American people with people from around the world. It truly does speak to just what a wonderful organization Global Ties U.S. is. We've been around for 54 years. So we certainly know the hard work, dedication, and community support that it takes. Catherine had mentioned how citizen diplomacy is a superpower. And I love that because I think I've got a 9-year-old daughter and she's always asking me if I had a superpower, what would it be? And it just comes to light that, as much as we want these great superpowers, we already possess them. And that is that people to people connections, those conversations that we have that can make the world a more peaceful and prosperous place. So I'm really excited. It sort of speaks to the optimistic attitude that I have on how impactful and important these conversations are. So just to give you a little bit of information about Utah Council for Citizen Diplomacy and the work that we're doing in advocacy to help strengthen international relations here. Alistair, will you go to the next slide, please? Our mission is to promote respect and understanding between the people of Utah and other nations, and we use citizen diplomacy as our guiding principle. The concept that we all play that role in shaping U.S. foreign relations, and it's done as simple as one handshake at a time. The makeup of our organization is I do have 5 full-time staff that are paid. And then I truly believe that getting young students who are interested in international relations involved with taking the theory that they learn in school and putting it into practical use is so important. And so I have 7 interns and fellows and then a board of 15 members. Next slide, please. And I approach this work from a public administration background. That's what my education is in. And so when I started about 5 years ago, I really wanted to make sure that as we move forward with our growth, we really do have strategy behind what that approach is. And so, our 4 future focuses that have really helped guide us over the last 5 years has been any kind of growth needs to be guided by our mission. And it has to be data-driven evidence. Otherwise, it's really great that we want to do good work because we're a nonprofit, but we really have to have that evidence of how do we grow as an organization moving forward. In being an organization that connects people to people, we've got to foster collaborations through strategic outreach, again, tying that back into our mission and then our data-driven evidence. And then social responsibility, both with the community and the people that we work with, and then also with climate change and environmental impact. We want to make sure that we're playing our role as a responsible nonprofit. And then next slide, please. So numbers at a glance, and this comes from our decade report that I did just this last year. And if you're interested, I'm happy to share the link so you can see the full picture of it. So we've been an organization for 54 years, but in the last 10 years, we have hosted 172 countries, 1,000 dinners. We've welcomed 4,000 international visitors. But what I really want to focus in on is we've had 21,000 days here in Utah. We've hosted nearly 65,000 meetings, tours, volunteer service projects, and cultural activities. And our local community has donated 71,000 hours worth of their time and their talent to meet with international visitors and hosting dinners. And I bring that up because as we look at these large scale numbers, that's a lot of citizen diplomacy. That is a lot of people engaging with this incredible program that was created so many years ago, which means that there's a lot of power and authority behind the role that we as these grassroots organizations play in helping shape public discourse, and for Utah, it really is being Utah's leader in shaping global engagement and how people in our community and our state want to engage with global trends. So I mentioned that only to encourage everybody to think about this larger scale global engagement that Global Ties does with nearly 90 organizations here in America, and then quite a few other organizations internationally. That's a lot of citizen diplomacy. That's a lot of grassroots work that is being done. Next slide, please. So about 5 years ago, one of the big questions that I was hearing from our local community is, we love IVLP, we love people diplomacy, but what happens when these international visitors return home to their countries? Was a really great opportunity for them to tour America, but do they do anything with that information? And so we started a program called Diplomacy in Action, and it was just sending a simple email several times a year to our visitors and saying, tell us what you've been doing, and if any of the work that you are doing can be tied back into the people, the resources that you gained while you were here in Utah. And we got these really great quotes from our visitors, talking about how Utah was the turning point of my life, not only professionally, but personally, in making connections with other entrepreneurs. I see my own business, learning about Utah, its culture, its people, experiences I cherish a lot, and I'm grateful to be part of this program. Somebody even mentioned how Utah was the Disneyland of entrepreneurs, just talking about the great resources that he gained. And then one woman talking about the amount of information and resources and people she met, she felt like she got a master's degree to be able to enhance the work that she does. Like, those are very powerful statements. But as we started collecting these really great quotes and stories from individuals, we realized that there was something even more important behind the stories that they were saying. If we started bringing all of these stories together, we were able to pull out these very specific themes to show that there was some statistics behind how we were impacting public diplomacy and international relations. Next slide, please. And so we every other year we do a qualitative analysis of these stories that we collect. And I'm so sorry, the print is so small. And like I said, I'll share the link if you're interested in seeing, but really it's just here to give you a snapshot. Through our qualitative analysis, what we've been able to establish is that 81% of our visitors to Utah feel innovation or renewed energy for the work that they do. That they, 29% of the individuals work to pass laws or public policies based off of the democratic values that they saw here. And then 76% of people feel like there's an improved U.S. and Utah relations. The reason I share this is because being able to get these numbers and get these stories, it has been such a powerful tool for us to go to our elected officials and go to our funders and go to our leaders here in Utah and say, look at the large scale impact that bringing people in and hosting a series of meetings do for our community as well as the globe. And we've got lots of stories, a toolbox full of stories from individuals where they go out and they build up their programs and resources. And then there's this reciprocal reaction of them coming back to the Utah resources and saying, what you did was so important to me expanding my work that I want to share with you the work that we're doing. And sometimes it's a sharing of best practices and resources back. Sometimes it's a monetary share. We've had individuals be able to get these huge grants and be able to create these collaborative projects with our Utah resources. Next slide, please. Based off of that one project that we did in connecting with our alumni and keeping them engaged, we've been able to connect with our general community even more by growing our organization and programs. So this particular slide is a timeline of the programs that we've ran. And for the last 10 years, international visitor leadership has been at the top, our home hospitality program with the international visitors, our World Affair lecture series, our Vivaldi by Candlelight, our music diplomacy event. But we've also been able to determine where are the pockets of communities that we're missing so that we can meet them where they're at with the programs that we're able to host. And especially fostering a newer generation of international relations citizen diplomats through our young constituents. Expanding our dialogues and lectures and conversations, looking at different exchange programs, building up our Young Diplomats of Utah program has really been able to grow our constituency to create this legacy of citizen diplomacy work. Last slide, I think. And so where we're at in moving forward, we've gotten such big support in the work that we're doing, that we're also looking at creating a Utah Peace and Diplomacy Resource Center where individuals who are working in international relations will have a space in Utah to come together. Right now it's virtual. Our hope is that it can be a physical location, but really tie into the historical diplomacy education. Where is the foundation for the work that we do? Whether it's through arts, it's through academics, it's through human rights, climate change, you really looking at the comprehensive role that we as grassroots organizations play. And I didn't realize it. I'm a part of Sherry's fan club for sure, because I had quoted her in our decade report where she said that citizen diplomacy is deeply rooted in the United States by enabling individuals to contribute directly to world peace, international understanding, and cooperation. This effort has produced an array of programs and projects that are genuine grassroots efforts to address common problems and build enduring connections among people of various countries. And I just felt like that embraces the future of UCCD and the Global Ties Network. So with that, thank you.
That's great, Felecia. I'm excited to hear more about the center and how that develops. And so it's time for questions. And I would like to give Michael McCary the first question.
Oh, thank you, Katherine. great presentations, really great presentations, inspiring. And my whole career as a Foreign Service officer has had the Alliance. I've worked with it, NCIV and Global Ties, it's different iterations, and the work you do is just spectacularly good. I'm really proud to be connected with you in some way. Here's my question, and I think both Annette and Felecia touched on this, but I want to raise the question out to the whole network, or if you comment on it based on the whole network. I think you were addressing my concern here already. I think we all can agree that there's an international dimension to virtually everything that happens in the United States, whether it's education or business, public health, as we all know, immigration, diversity. If you're a cause-oriented person concerned about climate, there's an international connection everywhere. Again, across the network, as you work on specific programs, but we'll have a thematic focus. How challenging is it to connect those things into the mosaic of the broad community interest? It's great for the state of Utah, it's great for the state of Florida, it's great for the state of Illinois, because in all these different aspects, because the Americans who work in those different sectors don't always talk to each other. But that's the policy pitch you want to have, I think. I'm not telling you things policy pitch you want to have for a mayor or member of Congress. So how hard is it?
Annette, do you want to go first? I see you
Well,
kind of preparing to.
I mean, Mike, thank you very much for the question, and thank you too for your leadership when you were at the Alliance. I mean, I had some great joint calls on advocacy with Mark and you, and answering calls to do that. So thanks very much. As you said, these topics that we're working on, I mean, they're timely, they are relevant, and we are doing our very best to say, look, this is why this project is here in Miami, but they're going across the U.S. They're starting in Washington. Let's say IVLP, okay, and a topic. They're in Washington and they're going to 3 or 4 other cities. The only reason they would stop in Miami or Salt Lake or our friends in other cities is because we have these individuals to make connections and introductions and to share best practices. So we can, and we often step back from what we do in Miami and we talk about how relevant it is, but then we try and give our members of Congress, their staff, or someone in their office a better picture of what this looks like and how important it is for the U.S. so that they can have this idea of it's not just coming to Miami and they're going to go to the beach and have all this other stuff, but this is a really important topic, and moving on from there, it's I think they get it. I think they get it if we can convey it that way. Felecia?
What I think it is a little bit difficult for individuals to understand the comprehensive, the large scale picture of what the visitors experience when they come to the United States, and then also all of the players that are involved in the United States in hosting. When COVID hit, one of the things that we did was create a citizen diplomacy map, and we collaborated with, I think it was about 40 other of our community-based members. So Miami was certainly one of them, Denver. And what we wanted to do is be able to demonstrate on a global scale, what was that reach? And then also, where are all of these different organizations located at through an interactive map? I think that certainly helped individuals understand just a little bit better about the experience, the American experience that individuals get when they come here through the IVLP program. Yeah, that's what I would say.
I'll just add real quick, Mike. I think one of the things that, we talk a lot about in the public diplomacy community is how relevant and important all the public diplomacy tools are to advancing U.S. foreign policy. And so what's really magical about the network is that they're able to find resources of experts on every dimension of foreign policy that our diplomats in the field deem to be important. They're able to find that resource in their community and identify people who probably didn't think that they were citizen diplomats, but had this expertise to share and connect and build, a peer network with a colleague they never would have discovered from Morocco or Moldova, or Iceland, wherever they may be. And so, so really, I think that the ability of our network leaders, our professionals, to kind of pull those threads together and show how through this incredibly powerful tool, they're advancing foreign policy by making citizen diplomats of their community leaders. It's just something really compelling.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And we also have a question here I want to call out from Jeffrey Simmons. Hi, Jeffrey. Jeffrey is a PD Council Rising professional and also, I understand, a Rangel Fellow, Foreign Service Officer. Congratulations to you. And he asked a great question here about, what's been going on since COVID hit, and how will citizen diplomacy continue to evolve to take advantage of fledgling technology. For example, Global Ties have we looked into creating cultural exchange programming using virtual reality technology to promote strong ties with countries still under strict COVID restrictions? Well, I'll start off by, it's a great question, Jeffrey, and I'll start off by saying that what happened with COVID obviously is, we all had to pivot, we all had to reimagine our work, we had to rethink what exchanges meant. And how are we going to be able to advance our mission at Global Ties U.S., but also each of our network members, running largely professional organizations, had to rethink about how to meet their missions. And virtual really was a big pivot for the network as a whole. And what I will say is that we received the most outstanding empathetic support from the Office of International Visitors at the Educational and Cultural Affairs Bureau, to realize that if we're going to seize this moment to really try to modernize exchange programs, take more advantage of virtual technology, that the network needed resources to be able to procure the hardware and software that was needed to put everyone on a level playing field. Because while we have a largely professional network, it's fairly uneven across the country. So how do we get everyone the resources they need to level set? And then how do we use this time to really invest in professional development and training? And so we launched a virtual exchange academy to really make sure that all of our members were equipped to do virtual exchanges, but also to maintain those components of virtual moving forward when we return to some in-person programming and really capitalize on the best of virtual technology. So I'll just say that I think that what's encouraging is that we have partners at the State Department that see technology really as an enhancement and not a replacement for international exchanges happening in person, but an enhancement of it. And I'm excited to see kind of where this evolution goes further. Felecia, and I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I can give just a case study of how the support for advances in technology helped us immensely here in Utah. And I don't know how many people in the audience are familiar with Utah, but about 2/3 of our population live along a 100-mile corridor called the Wasatch Front. And then the rest of Utah is very rural. And we are the only community-based member in Utah. We serve the entire state, which we've been able to do. And I would never say that COVID was positive in any way, but it certainly propelled ideas that we had been thinking on how do we better represent Utah and not just this very specific community population dense area. And so through, one example is we were able to purchase the technology that we needed to do virtual tours. And there was one particular group we were hosting from the Ukraine on renewable energy, went down to the middle of Utah and did a live tour of a geothermal resource center that to this group and be able to, also have on the line experts from the University of Utah talking through what this geothermal field meant for renewable energy here. Before, if we were doing that in person, it would be arranging a van or a bus and then taking the entire day to go down there and then come back. But they were able to get at least a sense of what this resource meant and talking through in real life time. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the technology, being able to purchase the technology and the equipment needed to do a live stream video in the middle of Utah.
That's fantastic. That's a great story, Felecia. Thank you. I hadn't heard that yet. And there's a related question, and I'm hoping that maybe you can get into it a little bit more too. From Greta Morris. Hi, Greta. Great to see your name. How have you been able to continue your exchange and advocacy efforts during the COVID pandemic? And how do you plan to re-engage as we hopefully move to a post-COVID world? Have you learned some new and creative things that will impact your work going forward? So Annette, what about you?
I'm happy to take that. It was nail biting when this happened, when COVID stopped everything in its tracks. But I think all of us who are just so passionate about this program and see the value and the exchange and the relationships that develop, we're committed. And as Katherine, as you acknowledged, Office of International Visitors and our State Department partners, your office, and then the network across the whole, to making this happen. So we did some innovation as well. We made sure that we could do our best to bring something to life. I mean, we didn't do what you just explained, Felecia, which is super cool about that tour, but we really worked hard to show the visitors what it might look like if they were in Miami. And I think some of the other innovations, there's always a flip side to a few things. And part of it was bringing together different types of people that normally wouldn't have been in the room together. And that has really been pretty amazing to see how we can get not just someone on staff at the Florida East Coast Railroad, but then the president of the East Coast Railroad was able to join a meeting and make these connections. So we've worked hard to bring that to life. And I think that some of the connections, even if in a Zoom box, some ways are a little more personal. I mean, I don't want to replace in-person visits by any means, but I think that as we look forward to what the future looks like, and if there's a part of a hybrid program that can get kind of intimate when you're having just a cultural exchange with someone in a Zoom box, we're open to all of it. So thanks for the question, and look forward to see what the future brings to us.
That's great.
Can I just add
Felecia.
that one thing I certainly notice is that the ability to host our programs virtually has certainly opened up opportunities for individuals around the world that may not be able to come to America and Utah. We've been able to talk to people and their families and, people that, maybe I shouldn't say this, but sneak people into the meetings because it's somebody that is really passionate about the work they're doing and they know they're going to benefit from the information that is exchanged. But even here in Utah, we've been able to invite individuals from rural communities or don't have the means to come to Salt Lake City to be able to engage with individuals they never would have met. We've got communities here that have never met anybody who was a refugee or anyone who was Muslim or, fill in the blank, but now we're able to at least get those conversations going and challenge them to start thinking about what can we do as a resource and a support to bring international relations to your community, and again, meet you where you're at, as opposed to expecting you to come meet us here in the capital city. And so it really has been an equalizer for being inclusive and being equitable for the programs that we offer.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing, since we're mainly like talking about advocacy today, is that in all of the conversations that I had with committee staffers, how important it was for the network to be able to get these resources, to be able to modernize exchange programs through having a virtual component, how important that was to them, because they realized that this network, we're celebrating 60 years. It took 60 years to build this infrastructure. It took, and they did not want that to go away overnight because of COVID, to be wiped out. And so for a lot of our members, IVLP is not all that they do. A lot of, if you saw the slide that Felecia put up with all the programming that the Utah Council for Citizen Diplomacy partakes in, there's a lot of World Affairs Councils of America work that our members do. There's a lot of other exchange programs they work through, either from that Global Ties U.S. passes on, or our National Programming Agency partners do through Meridian, IIE, World Learning, just to name Cultural Vistas. So in order to maintain this infrastructure and make sure that they were ready for post-COVID and all the needs that exchanges were going to have to meet to advance our foreign policy, and fighting this pandemic and other transnational challenges, they wanted to make sure that these resources were getting to the network, to keep the network sustainable, obviously, but also to prepare for this new chapter in international exchange. So I just want to make sure I was adding that. And Gail Witherall, you had a question as well about kind of virtual versus in person. I hope that your question was addressed, but please do add in another question if not, and we'll make sure that we'll try to cover that. There's a lot in here. A question that came in earlier was from Pat Kuchlis. Hi, Pat. Good to see your name as well. Explaining why IB committees in her state are hiring paid interns when there's not IB programs. And I just want to just take this opportunity to kind of emphasize a couple more things. Is that first, we do strongly believe in paid internships because it promotes equity and opportunity to build a more diverse and inclusive pipeline of young professionals coming into our field. But also again, to reiterate, our members, IVLP is really at the core of the network, but our members do a host of other programs, international exchange or World Affairs Council type, informational programs, and a host of other services to their community. And there's a great question here from our colleague Jackie Scheit that I'm going to get to in a second. And so paid internships, sometimes that might be to support the International Visitor Leadership Program, but it might also be to support a host of other programs that our member is seeing through to be of service to their community, and also to keep their community connected with the rest of the world through different international exchange or public diplomacy programs. And also, I think really the last thing is that this pivot to virtual has been insanely labor intensive. A lot of work in learning how to meaningfully engage, not just turn on a Zoom conference and talk. Like it's doing the work virtually is actually it takes a lot more people. It can be really taxing. And we've had to kind of learn and grow as professionals and adapting. So I would say that the network has been working harder the last year and a half during virtual programming than going back to in person. But again, for Congress, it was really important that this network be sustainable and continue. And so it was no question that the money through what we call the Community Partnership Grant, not just continue, but increase to keep this network viable. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Annette or Felecia.
I mean, I wanted to say that it also gave us an opportunity to do these projects that we've been thinking about and incubating and thinking, what can we do? How can we stay in touch, like Felecia mentioned, with the alumni network? How can we really engage with people that have been in our community? And often we will assign that to an intern with a staffer overlooking that. But there are a lot of hours, as you said, Katherine, working on projects like that. And there was something else you just mentioned, but went out of my head. So I'll just wait for the next question.
Okay, well, there is a question here for Felecia that I'll get to in a second. I'll just say too that there is that virtual IVLP is happening. The network is applying for different programs, and a return to in-person is actually happening as well, which is a whole other challenge. Is how do we do this in a hybrid way? So yeah, we're continuing to learn and grow. But there's a great question here from our beloved colleague Jackie Shipe, Global Ties Alabama. Hi, Jackie. And when we're talking about other programs that our members do to be of service to their community, there's a question for you, Felecia. Can you share about your organization's work on refugee resettlement, which we're seeking to collaborate with other interested stakeholders on in Northern Alabama?
Yeah, that is a great question and very timely right now. So my professional history is I worked about 10 years in both in the government and nonprofit sector with refugee resettlement and integration. And I think almost all of my team also has that refugee resettlement and integration. Up until what happened in Afghanistan in August, we weren't doing direct collaboration. We were doing a lot of meetings and, trying to see how do we take the best practices that refugee resettlement agencies were doing in civic engagement and youth involvement, nonprofit management, accountability and transparency, but very little direct work up until August, when we did get quite a few individuals contacting us from Afghanistan who said, we are in a bad situation because we are alumni of state-sponsored programs. Can you help us? Because of the role that we have played in building civil society, our families are targeted. And so, there's varying degrees of what we can do for individuals, whether they're already in the United States and we're trying to get them the right visas and the right status to be able to get the services and help that they need to resettle here, whether they're in a second country applying to come to the United States or another country for refugee resettlement, or they're still in Afghanistan and trying to be evacuated to safety. And really, I think, and this ties into this whole conversation of advocacy, all of our elected officials are very aware that, the role that we play in connecting Utah to the world has had real consequences of, sometimes there could be a negative impact to the work that we do, and we need to keep the safety and security of these individuals in mind. And as well as they are allies of our country, and we might want to consider what we can do to help support them and protect them in coming to the United States, or at least, another country that is one of our allies. So a lot of it is advocacy to see if our IVLP alumni can get the visas, and their families, the visas that they need to resettle safely. As well as community education. Education is key. Why do we want refugees in our community? What are the benefits that they bring to our community? And really just this large scale education effort of the Department of State.
That's great, Felecia. And thank you for all the incredible work you're doing there. We've got a lot of questions, everyone, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to try to condense a few questions, but I did want to take first another question from another member of our network, another colleague of ours, Mary Intema in Boston, who leads World Boston. And she asked a great question here, kind of emphasizing advocacy. And she wants to know if you can share about the bipartisan appeal of citizen diplomacy in general, and IVLP in particular. It doesn't really make the news, but she's constantly pleasantly surprised by the enduring support. And why is that? Why is there such bipartisan support for the work that we do?
I'll start this answer, and Felecia, you can follow up if you want. I think it's because it's real. I mean, we're not just putting out talking points or saying this is important. I think that it touches people in a way particularly when we're doing advocacy, when we try and find out what's important to our members of Congress, what's important to the staff. Have they traveled abroad? Are they, when they go on these CODELs, where do they go, and what kinds of relationships? So we try and make a connection there. And I think because this is people to people and people are involved, that this is the real success of this, that we can show them what matters. And as I mentioned earlier, I know you couldn't really see the flyer, but we will personalize a flyer. Like if we think that one of our members is, let's just say, example, Republican, trade is super important, national security is super important. And when we say, well, look, we've got this group that came on protecting soft targets, excuse me, from terrorism, and we point out the types of exchanges that happen, and then we pivot. And in South Florida, there are a lot of R's and more Dems now too, but we will try and find what resonates. I mean, that takes work. I mean, it's not just a blanket, like, support this program. It's an amazing program. So we try to speak to the issue that we think is close at heart, and get some traction that way and get bipartisan support.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing to add to that is this international exchange programs is such an easy sell on why you would want to support it. I'm in a broadly stereotype here, so I apologize if I offend anyone, but for individuals that might want to see what is the benefit for the American population, well, it's an international relations program where all of the funding is spent on the home front. It's here in our own communities. It helps combat negative stereotypes. It's a national security defense, and then on the other side of the spectrum, if, social services and international support and aid is important, we're helping build the capacity of all of these nonprofits, government officials, religious leaders around the world, to strengthen their communities and create partnerships and networks and whatnot. So it's bipartisan because it's such a great program that demonstrates so easily how it benefits the globe, but then also how does it benefit the home front here?
That's great. Well, I am going to try to answer take three questions in one, which are great. There's a wonderful question from Karima Daoud. There's a great question from Julie Moyes and Keanu Katie. I'm sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly, but it's all about expanding the audience for your work and kind of engaging people that aren't already in the Global Ties Network, aren't naturally inclined to kind of be interested in foreign affairs or in citizen diplomacy, and specifically young people with more diverse backgrounds, like trying to get them involved in the work that we do, and also with public and private primary and secondary schools around the country. So how do you both approach finding new voices, new resources, new volunteers, people that aren't naturally kind of inclined to support your work, and how do you expand the work to include more young people, especially those coming from more diverse backgrounds?
Do you want me? I'll go first.
Yeah, please go first.
Yeah, sure. So, young people, it's about the young people. They're so important. They have such incredible imaginations and visions. And I really feel like, those are the individuals that we need to foster. So, the short answer being, starting up the Young Diplomats of Utah program, where we are looking at how do we get high school students globally interested, globally engaged into college to study international relations and diplomacy, and then into international diplomacy careers. And so we've got a full program that just weaves from one stage of their life into another, and we're really excited to see. The other thing that we're currently doing, and this is going back to our future focus of being data driven, is right now we're in the middle of doing a very intense asset map. taking a look at who our constituency is, both geographically as well as demographically. So we are taking all of the zip codes that we serve through our various programs, but then also overlaying it with who is it from those communities, and then measuring that against census data to see if we are truly getting representation of those particular communities. So example, if I've got a zip code where 40% of the population is Latino or Hispanic, but only 5% of our demographics shows that, then we're missing the mark there. We're really missing a population that we need to target our outreach and be a little bit more strategic so that we can be representative of the people who represent Utah as a whole. That really is our target in being in expanding who we engage with our programs, how do we engage with them, and really letting the evidence guide us to how do we meet them to bring our programs to their communities and their lives.
So in Miami, it's interesting because we often share the statistic that more than 50% of our population is foreign born, right? So our resources, the people you see behind me in these meetings, I mean, it's very diverse. So we don't have a problem getting meetings with a diverse constituency here, but the issue of bringing it down to attracting members, to encouraging younger people. It's one of the reasons we're going out on a limb. And in 2022, there is no cost for membership to Global Ties. We don't want that to be a transactional relationship. We want more people to be citizen diplomats. And we think that if we can attract more people through the work we say, look, join us, it's free. But we would like you to, we articulate a few things, like one might be helping us advocate for exchanges, hosting someone for dinner. And then the other relationship that has worked for us is relationships with professors in the area universities who then will send interns to us. So we're trying on multi-levels, but you have to realize, again, remember, our funding goes to supporting IVLP. And we know that tangentially, all this other work that we do brings in people who will ultimately support IVLP, but we need unrestricted funds to do this. So those individuals who have been our members, and a few of them are in the audience today, we're asking them if they wouldn't mind converting to becoming donors and supporters. And through new initiatives, we'd like to start Gen Z projects and have some, but this starts, we need seed money to do this and to really reach to middle school and high school students. So you said it earlier, Katherine, it's very labor intensive, the work that we do, but it's also a labor of love. So we're always thinking, we're always trying to say, how can we do this better, smarter, and with just enough resources to get it done? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just add that we do pass through funding via something called the Community Partnership Grant, but it's not a lot of money when it comes down to it. What our members have to raise kind of 50% more to just make IVLP work in their communities. So if you want to support citizen diplomacy, they do rely a great deal on donor funding. And so please do keep that in mind in your end of year giving for members of our network. And I will, there's so many questions in here. I want to personally apologize to a few people. There's a couple of questions about how Global Ties U.S. works. There's a couple of questions specifically about some of our members. And so I just want to make sure I'm available. My email is kbrown@globaltiesus.org. Please do email me. I will answer questions about how we work with consultants, about specific members in specific states, about the professional education that we provide to our members and the core of diplomacy. There's also some questions we just didn't get here about engaging alumni and about impact. And so I apologize for that. I just want to be able to hand the mic over to Joel Fishman, who's the Public Diplomacy Association of America president, to close us out. And I personally just want to thank Sherry Mueller, Annette Alvarez, Felecia Maxfield-Barrett for being here today and for this wonderful program. Thanks for continuing to inspire me. Joel? Okay, well, I don't believe Joel's with us, and we're at time. Joel's here.
Joel
Thank-
is with you. He forgot
Thank you, Joel.
to-
Sorry about that.
He forgot to unmute himself. But thank you. Despite everything, thank you, Katherine, Annette, Felecia. The many questions we had from around the country attest to the how long this program could have gone on and how interesting it was. I took down a number of words: respect, understanding, collaboration, social responsibility, connections. How important this is. And Felecia, if your daughter asks you again what superpowers you have, perhaps you could say building trust, so much in deficit these days. The work that all of you and Sherry before you have done to bring the best of ourselves, of our communities, and our national values to make the world a better place could not be more important. Please join us on December 13, which is the first Monday, but is actually the second Monday in December, December 13, for a program focusing on Afghanistan, a look back at the whole of government enterprise. The program will feature two former ambassadors whose names are known to all of us, ambassadors to Afghanistan, Ryan Crocker and Ron Newman, who will be speaking about Afghanistan in the whole of government context. Our colleague, Don Bishop, who was a PAO in Afghanistan, will moderate this program. It will build on some of the views of Afghanistan that appeared in the last PDAA newsletter. If you haven't read that yet, I recommend it to you. If you need a copy, please email me, fishman@comcast.net, and we'll get it to you. On January 3rd, John Dixon will talk about his latest book, History Shock, about when history collides with foreign relations. And on February 7th, Alan Goodman will speak on international students in the U.S., new research. Goodman is the president of IIE, and he will focus on higher education as an export and the latest open doors research on international student flows. So thank you again, everyone. We'll see you on December 13th.